one is going to have to pay the debt, and people are scrambling to see that the other fellow pays. So we're beginning to divide up, and I think we begin to see industry, labor, and consumers beginning to take very sharp sides on these issues. It's become, I think, a very basic and quite dangerous political issue, because it leads very quickly to fundamental concerns that we've tended to push under the rug. The question of the validity of the private enterprise system, for example. The question of whether we can tolerate wars. Questions of racial discrimination. These are things that we tend to avoid talking about, but the environmental issue sort of casts a bright light on them, making them very difficult to avoid.
And let me point out to you that the old corny economist argument that we are doing an enormous favor to various third world countries by buying their minerals from them is just plain ordinary hogwash. We in the rich nations eventually will have the energy, we think, and the technology to provide substitutes when the high-grade minerals are gone, leaving the third world holding the bag if we continue to go on down that route. It's quite clear to me, I think it's quite clear to most ecologists who have looked at the situation, that you cannot separate the question of the rich and the poor from the question of preserving the world's environment.
I think the developing countries begin to realize that they have been victimized ecologically, so to speak, by colonization. That the population explosion is in effect the last remnants of the harmful influence of colonization on the colonies. And the proposition, which I believe will come up at the official conference here for ecological reparations, I think is a just idea, which the developing countries are putting forward, and which I think reflects very clearly their proper understanding of the ecological base of their difficulties.
It must be realized that the integration of environmental control programs in the economic development program of developing countries will call for additional resources which are already limited in these countries. We believe that if developed countries are genuinely interested in the improvement of the overall human environment, for after all, we all live in one world, this extra burden should be partly shared by the developed countries.
The developed countries must understand that countries engaged in an all-out struggle to improve the well-being of their people, and which are deeply concerned with problems of development, tend to see strict environmental controls as a luxury which they cannot afford.
The major problems of the physical environment in Ghana are not those caused by industrial pollution or the spoliation of pleasure beaches by oil from huge tankers, but the simple, elementary ones of biological pollution, such as the disposal of human excreta and the removal of disease-bearing organic matter from drinking water. In fact, in most areas of Africa, the provision of safe potable water is the most important physical problem of the environment.
Countries with but a small fraction of the world's population consume the bulk of the world's production of minerals, fossil fuels, and so on. Thus we see that when it comes to the depletion of natural resources and environmental pollution, the increase of one inhabitant in an affluent country at his level of living is equivalent to an increase of many Asians, Africans, or Latin Americans at their current material levels of living. The inherent conflict is not between conservation and development, but between environment and the reckless exploitation of man and earth in the name of efficiency.
If poor nations are faced with the problem of growth within acceptable environmental limits, the rich nations are clearly caught up with it even more seriously. We're meeting in this worldwide conference largely because the evidence is now overwhelming that roughly a century of very rapid economic advance throughout the world has contributed to a monstrous assault on the quality of life in the developed countries.
We have got to learn to live with stabilized populations, with a more modest use of resources, and we cannot cheat by simply saying we're going to carry on with the same division as we have now. Because if 2/3 of humanity, as our delegates have been telling us again and again today, if 2/3 are to stay poor so that 1/3 can stay rich, my friends, they won't do it. It's as simple as that.
It has been my experience that people who are at cross purposes with nature are cynical about mankind and ill at ease with themselves. Modern man must re-establish an unbroken link with nature and with life. He must again learn to invoke the energy of growing things and to recognize, as did the ancients in India centuries ago, that one can take from the earth and the atmosphere only so much as one puts back into them. In their hymn to earth, the sages of the Atharva Ved chanted, "What of thee I dig out, let that quickly grow over. Let me not hit thy vitals or thy heart." So can man himself be vital and of good heart and conscious of his responsibility. I thank you, Mr. President.
We talk about quality of life. Well, quality of life is based upon what people think is most important when they're called upon to decide. Now, we've gone out of the period when we can just simply think that anything is possible. Man has sobered up somewhat, and the environment issue has made him realize that he